Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Spartan Forge. Today I am joined by hunter and entrepreneur Kendall Card. Kendall is a well-known Western hunter and has launched many successful business ventures in the hunting industry, including Camo Fire, Ovis and Crispi Boots. We discuss starting those businesses, financially planning for a mountain goat hunt, his 2020 Alaskan Mountain Goat Bowhunt with Tim Burnett, and his love for hunting whitetails in Kentucky. And this episode is brought to you by Spartan Forge. The Spartan Forge app utilizes years of military background and machine learning to pull from millions of data points to accurately predict deer movement, including GPS data, 30 years of weather, academic, and state research. The new app will include GPS mapping with incredible aerial imagery, offline dependability, deer prediction, weather updates, journal entries, and much more. The beta app is released now, but in just over a day, they exceeded their goal and have the app temporarily only open to those beta testers. So the purpose of beta testing is for the consumer to get the product at a lower price, while providing feedback to work out the final bugs before it goes full scale. The full-scale app should be out soon, probably in the next couple of weeks here. So if you use the code East Meets West, you'll save 25% off of the Spartan Forge app at spartanforge.ai. Tethered is a company founded on the principles of educating the hunting community on saddle hunting while creating the most innovative, lightweight, safe products for saddle hunting. They have mobile hunting gear options for all types of hunters and continue to push the envelope. To learn more about tethered and saddle hunting, head over to tetherednation.com. If you check out the Phantom saddle system is what I'm using with the 8mm ropes. I have 2 cis haulers on each side, the Predator platform, and also the one stick. So I have the whole entire system there that I'm using. Check those out. Maven is building the highest quality optics at half the price of their competitors through their direct-to-consumer business model. They want to create the best optics for the job, period. Their products are backed with a lifetime no-fault warranty and an incredible customer experience. I'm using the RF1 rangefinder now on all of my hunts from east to west. Super nice. You can use a little dial on the side to be able to adjust the brightness depending on what time of the day it is. Very simple to use, easy to range, gives you angle compensation and everything in between. You can use a coupon code EastMeetsWest-gift for a free gift with any full price optics order at mavenbuilt.com. GoWild is a free social community built by hunters for hunters. You can join me on GoWild today to get $10 to spend on gear for just setting up your account. You keep unlocking GoWild rewards, and you can now see my gear setups under my profile. And you can join in the App Store or at timetogowild.com. Use the code EastMeetsWest to save 10% off of all of the hunting gear on their website. I had Brad, the founder, on last week's podcast. You can go back and check that out if you would like. All right, so on today's episode, I have Kendall Card. And I'm excited to have Kendall on here and break up a little bit of the whitetail content here to talk about a super adventure hunt in mountain goat hunts and have Kendall kind of break that down for us. It's really cool. And I also get into talking a little bit about some of his business ventures because he's been a part of starting some really great companies here that have, the Camo Fire was the first one, as you'll hear me talk about it here, that came to mind, and now with Ovis and Crispi, the U.S. distributor here. It's incredible. So I was excited to get to interview Kendall here, and I hope everyone has a chance to get out and hunt this weekend. So in Pennsylvania, this is the opening day of the archery bear season as well as muzzleloader, and which is crazy because our archery bear season, I remember, probably 3-4 years ago, where it was only 3 days long in November. And then it went to a week. And now we're looking at a month-long archery bear season, which is really exciting. So I might try to get out and do a little bit of hunting and maybe get lucky for a bear. But I'll be focused on probably picking up a New York tag here soon to start hanging up on the weekends, and looking at either going back to Ohio again during the rut, or maybe down to southern West Virginia with Josh from the Untamed. So looking at a couple different options to hunt mountain bucks in some different states now that I have my week of vacation left, so, and not needing to use it here in PA. So looking at some different options there. But anyways, I hope you enjoy this podcast with Kendall, and have a great rest of your week. All right, we're live. Kendall Card, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, man. It's good to be with you, Beau.
Yeah, I'm glad to get to have you on. I was able to meet you in person there, I guess a couple months ago now, at the Total Archery Challenge up in Boyne, and I've heard a lot about you through Heather and just from watching some of your companies from afar and being a consumer of the products. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was psyched to meet you at that TAC in Michigan. It was a total last minute for me to go to that one. John was supposed to go. Oh no, Corey was supposed to go, but he had a wedding, or I don't know, something came up. So I was happy to go. And first time I'd really been to Michigan outside the airports. So I loved it. I'm already planning on going back to that one.
Yeah, that resort was beautiful. It was a nice place there, kind of in the middle of nowhere in northern Michigan. So that was a lot of fun.
And you're a road warrior. I cannot believe the journey you took to get there, and then you barely even did you shoot your bow at that, or did you just
no.
You were just taking care of business? My goodness.
No, I don't know if I even drew back my bow, to be honest with you. I don't think I shot at all. I walked up to the practice range and there was a bunch of people, and I was like, and I just ended up talking to people the whole time and just kind of, making connections and podcasting, and that was really about it. So I shot at the one before, the week before in Pittsburgh, so I kind of had it out of me a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was impressed, man. I was like, this guy is for real. He is dedicated. Yeah. Most guys would not do that. So I was super impressed, and it was really nice to meet you there in person and chat.
Well, I'm glad you thought that, because it was I was questioning myself driving there and back, I'll tell you that. But anyways, Kendall, so it's the first time that you're on the show, and I'd wanted to see if you just give a little background on yourself, and also maybe why people may have either heard of you or indirectly know of you because of some of the companies that you own or involved with.
Yeah, so name's Kendall Card. I grew up actually here in Utah, moved to Oregon when I was young, and I grew up hunting, got away from hunting in my kind of late teens, got more interested in climbing mountains and skiing, and did all that sort of thing. Moved back to Utah to go to college, and then, it's probably 15 years ago, moved to a small town. Got really interested in hunting again. Kind of remembered how fond I was of hunting and how much it was basically hunting was the reason why I really got into exploring the mountains. And it was what started it for me. And I feel like I've come full circle. And about that time that I moved to that small town, my business partner and I, Mark Strickland, he and I started CamoFire.com, which some guys may have heard of. And then we later started Black Ovis. We had a clothing company in there called Core 4 Element, and ran that for 3 years. And then Easton decided they wanted to buy it from us. So we didn't part with it easy. We actually told them, no, it's not for sale. And anyway, it came back, and they took over from there, which was good. It got us more focused back on Black Ovis and getting that thing up and running. So we run both those websites. And then about 6 years ago, in fact, I was looking back at some notes. In 2015, we had the opportunity to take over as the North American distributor for Crispi. So we run Crispi US, and then as a separate company, and then we're involved with Black Ovis and CamoFire. So it was actually very interesting at that TAC in Michigan. because I had a couple guys. I was eating breakfast. It actually was quite uncomfortable because one guy walked by and he looks over at me, and then he looks back, and then he looks back over at me, and he's like, and he walks back. He goes, "Hey, you're the guy from Black Ovis. I've seen you on YouTube." I'm all, yeah, man. He's like, "Oh, I love your stuff," and that was pretty flattering. But I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's just anyone can be on YouTube. It's really pretty easy." So
yeah, it's funny because I just from the little that I know about you, I feel like that you don't love being on the camera, so to speak. You like the behind the scenes type of stuff.
I don't seek it out. That's for sure. I'm not bad at it. The guys tell me that the guy that films all the stuff, all the product reviews here in house, he's always telling me that I do most everything in one take, because I had some TV experience. Not that I was like a TV type person, but when I was before I got back into hunting, I was doing film promotion, and one of the films I was promoting ski films for Teton Gravity Research, which is a big ski production company. And I did all their films here in Utah. And every year I would go on Fox TV, like our local Fox TV, and then a local TV station in Park City, Utah, and it was always live. So you literally had to nail it.
Yeah.
And I just got super comfortable behind a camera. I don't really get all that nervous. And so, but I'd just soon just go work in the warehouse or work in my office and let the rest of the guys do that. But I love gear, and I flat out love talking about gear. So those guys will arm wrestle me into getting in front of the camera every once in a while.
That makes sense. It's funny because Camo Fire, I feel like I'm not sure exactly when you had started it, but I remember when I was getting into Western hunting, which was 2016, is when I believe that's right when I discovered Camo Fire, and I bought a lot of my gear from Camo Fire as I was getting started, as I needed a bulk amount of stuff, and I needed keep it within a budget of sorts, and it just gave me the opportunity to do that. And it took me a little while to realize that Black Ovis and Camo Fire had some connections there, because that's where I was buying some of my Western hunting gear through Black Ovis then too, as it went along, and then got to learn a little bit about that both those were your businesses. And then going a little bit further, Crispi boots, I'd bought my first pair 3 or 4 years ago now, the Wild Rocks for whitetail hunting, and
that's right. You told me about that.
Yeah, I'd bought those and been using those for ever since, and still using them for an insulated boot for whitetail hunting. And I was never a big rubber boot guy, and my feet sweat too much, and where we have to walk into our stands or the trees here, they're longer walks than most of the Midwest is. So like you're walking in 1 to 2 miles in the mornings, by the time I'd get there, my feet would be sweating in these 1,000-gram insulated rubber boots with no breathability. And so that's when I went to a lighter leather boot, and then I just slide over boot covers once I got up into the tree to help add some insulation there. So anyways, I started with that, and then when I needed a new pair of Western boots this year, or as far as like lightweight early season ones, and I ended up picking up a pair of the Colorados, and then recently now got some Thors that I've been trying out that I think is going to be my early season whitetail / scouting / turkey boot.
Dude, welcome to the family. Sounds like you got a quiver going on there.
Yeah. When I find a boot that fits, when you find a company that like fits your feet and then they hold up and the quality's there, like there's no reason for me to really look other places, because it's too big of a gamble. So it works out.
Well, thanks for being a customer of all 3 businesses, all 3 websites. That's awesome. I didn't know. And I think there's a lot of guys like you that either they get into hunting and they face like, I got to get all this stuff. And if you were to go buy it at full pop, you'd be 5-6G before if you really were trying to go like A to Z, so CamoFire, I think there are a lot of guys that do that. They'll find CamoFire and they'll just kind of go hog wild, and then they'll kind of pick pick up items here and there, a year, 2, 3 later, etc. But
Yeah.
like a local, in fact, a guy that I used to backcountry ski with, and he was a mountain bike racer. He just messaged me a couple months ago and said, "Hey, you're still doing that camo stuff? Because I'm getting into hunting."
Really?
And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, and he started picking up stuff off CamoFire, and he said it's been a great way for him to kind of get into hunting without getting crushed from a gear standpoint. So yeah, we hear that a lot. That's cool. I'm glad that you found us.
Yeah, and it's funny, like what I've learned is like the first hunt that I went on out west was a backpack elk hunt. And I think like if I were to give any advice to someone else that was starting out brand new, I would start with like a truck camping hunt. So you don't need to buy everything at one time. There's some things you can skimp out on there to get you through on a lower budget, but still get to hunt. And then if you want to do the full backpack hunt type, then you can kind of piece that together over time.
I think the backpack hunt sounds so romantic. It's not like in love romantic, but so like idealistic.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys, think, man, that's how I want to do it, which is I aspire, it's a good aspiration, but I would agree 100%. If you're coming out west for your first or second or even third time, like hone your skill as a hunter and take away the backpacking portion of it that just I think complicates or adds a level of complexity where I remember I talked to a couple of guys and they said they spent more time trying to figure out the backpacking stuff and less time actual hunting, and they were trying to just get into these basins, and they had a blast. And I remember talking to them on the trail when I was in Colorado, but I felt bad for them because literally they hunted just a couple of the days and they ended up trying to figure out how to set up camp, where to move camp, moving, from the A to B to C location. And well, you guys got a good backpacking experience, that's for certain. But
yeah,
I felt bad they didn't get any good hunting in.
Yeah, I know. To be honest with you, I mean, now if I, whenever I do an elk hunt again, most likely I won't be doing a backpack hunt. I found that afterwards I went back to truck camping and being more mobile, and I felt like I was more effective that way and being able to jump around different places. It's all dependent on what you want out of it, but
totally.
For me, I liked that style quite a bit. But for my mule deer hunt this year, it'll be fully backpack. So that's at least for the first part of it, there is our plan. So,
yeah, the backpacking for mule deer, I've only done a couple of overnight, multi-night for elk. Almost all my elk hunting is from a base camp. Then we'll kind of starfish into a zone and then move camp, drive the truck 20 miles or 30 miles and jump in a different zone. Based on pressure. But my mule deer hunting that I do is almost exclusively backpack style. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just the deer seem to kind of hang out in some of the similar basins. I don't feel like I got to travel a ton, but
and just, I mean, I would think that to be able to see them in the high country, you have to be up there higher where you can find elk, a lot of times, in the timber and different spots there. So it'd be a rough walk all the way up to the high country every morning unless there was access that was up high.
Man, wouldn't it? It'd be horrible. Yeah. You'd be in killer shape, that's for sure, at the end of it.
Yeah, that's so true. So I think it's kind of self-explanatory that you've just loved the mountains, because even when you weren't into hunting, like you were doing other sports that were surrounded by being in the mountains. But what part of that, like those mountain hunts and things like that really draw you to it?
I think, well, it's interesting. I'm drawn to hard hunts, and I think I really like rugged country, because like you were saying, I've done a lot of mountain climbing, alpine rope climbing, a little bit of big wall climbing, in an alpine setting, a lot of backcountry skiing, ski mountaineering, where I go and climb, some peak and ski down a little chute. done a bunch in the Tetons, and I really just love the ruggedness of the mountains. I love being away from kind of the normal pathways. And so mountain hunting, when I got into bow hunting and into hunting again, it just seemed like that was what was fulfilling already to me. And so the harder, the better. And because I like testing my physical body, and I love the idea of the elements kind of raging against you, if you will. I mean, you never go on a hunt and think, oh, I hope it just nukes, 80 mile an hour winds and I just get dumped on. But I remember this one time, and I think this clicked for me when I was a ski instructor on Mount Hood. I was a ski instructor through high school and college. Here in Utah, I went to college and was taught skiing. But I remember this one time being up on the mountain, and I'd climbed part of Mount Hood to then ski down. And I remember it was just howling. And I thought, I want to be up here and survive everything that Mother Nature can throw at me. And I thought, what an amazing thing it is to have like rad gear or gear that performs, and to be able to survive and thrive in this kind of area. So take that over. And I've always thought about that, and I think about that often. So bring that over to mountain hunting. It's cool to be in these places where I'm confident. I push boundaries. I push my personal limits, and other people may be like, oh, that's not that hard, a particular hunt that I go on. But for me, it's, I'm pushing my own limits, and that's rewarding. And I like the challenge and the physical aspect. As long as my physical body can continue to do well, I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful for the strength I have. And, genetically speaking, there's a zillion things that go wrong with our bodies, but I'm glad that mine's healthy.
Yeah.
And, it's awesome. I look forward to it all year long. Every time I go to the gym, I run, I road bike, I think, man, this is preparation for going into the mountains and going into rough country.
Yeah. It's funny to me. Like I remember the first time that I went out there, that like out west and hunted the mountains, and how I thought I was in good shape, and then realized that you really probably never are in the best shape that you want to be for it. So like for me, it just fueled me every year just to try to be better, because it makes your hunt more enjoyable when you're able to climb up through there. And you have to push through those mental barriers no matter what. But it's just like, I want to be, feeling as good as possible and confident. It's more of building up your mental confidence than anything that, okay, there's a deer, elk, or whatever it might be all the way over there, and I have to drop down a couple thousand feet and up the other side, but you have that confidence that you can do it, rather than it just being like a drag the whole time.
Yeah. Or talking later and saying, well, there was that one buck, or there was that one whatever, and he looked good, but he was a long ways out. And then, which is, that's just an excuse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you either had it in you or you didn't. And it is what it is.
Yeah. And you wait all year for these opportunities. I mean, even with you living out west, I mean, you're obviously super busy with all your businesses. It's not like you get to hunt every day. So like, you cherish those moments that you do get to go in the mountains and want to be prepared for the best chance possible. Yeah.
Like my hunting partner in Colorado, he lives in the same town as I live in, small town here in Utah. And I remember I was begging to go on this hunt with him. And he is like, no, I've got this other buddy, and him and he had two friends. And I remember he would come back from the hunts, and I was like, dude, I want to come with you. He's like, no, and I was like, well, I'm elk hunting. But I remember him coming back from 2 or 3 hunts in a row. And one of them, he came home early, and he said that he perched up on one side of this drainage, and the other 2 guys were on the other side of this drainage, big faces, Colorado, a couple thousand feet to the bottom. And they were kind of glassing back and forth. And he said that they would check, do like a radio check once a day and say, hey, there's some movement over here, because you can't take you can't radio like in people in Colorado. And so I remember him saying that after 2 or 3 days, it was kind of rainy and it was, tough. And one of the guys radioed on the morning, said, "Hey, I'm done. I'm not interested in hunting anymore, and I'm out." And that happened to him 2 years in a row. And he basically had to bail because these guys were his ride. And I remember just telling him, like, "Man, you got to trust me. I'll weather any storm." And mentally, it's tough when you get 6, 5, 4, 3, 7 days in, and it's discouraging and whatnot. But it's not for everybody, but it'll certainly test your resolve. And I've gotten spanked, physically and mentally. But I remember him just coming back so discouraged. He'd prepared all year, and this is the one hunt he goes on every year, just to have his buddies basically, turn tail 2 or 3 days in.
Yeah, no, that would be absolutely terrible to deal with that. I mean, I feel like I've been lucky with my hunting partners up to this point that they've all been really good, and we've been able to mesh on hunts. And I have went on some that have been less than ideal, but not anything, crazy. So like now I have a set group of guys that I can go with. There's 3 people really that I can count on anytime, and like I don't want to stray away from it. I don't want to have the chance it really.
Yeah. I don't have but a few, and it's always hard to mix schedules, but
yeah. Oh yeah, that's definitely difficult. And I noticed, so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was last year you had went on a mountain goat hunt in Alaska, and you went with Tim Burnett, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tim's an awesome guy. I love his stuff that he puts out, and he was actually one of my first guests on the podcast about 3 years ago.
Heck yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so really great guy. I admire what he does. And so you went up to Alaska with him. But before we kind of get into that story, I want to hear how that hunt kind of came to be. Is that your first time doing mountain goats, or what does that look like?
So it was supposed to be my first time doing mountain goats. Tim and I had been talking, and that was 2020 so probably early on 2019. That might have been during the trade show time, January, February. And we got talking about bucket list items. I think I was out at the sheep show in Reno, and I said, "Man, I want to go on a mountain goat hunt." He's like, "I want to go on a mountain goat hunt." And he called me just a couple weeks later, said, "Hey, we can get in on a mountain goat hunt this year, like a 2-for-1." And the one thing about a 2-for-1 is they're cheaper because you're 2 hunters with one guide, but you also reduce the possibility of both of you filling your tag. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but from a dollars and cents standpoint, I was like, man, I'm definitely down for that. And so we were trying to piece it together, and I said, "No, let's just go in 2020. I want to be able to put it, because usually when you commit to a hunt like that, you're putting a down payment, a couple $1,000s or whatever, and then you can, depending on the guide or outfitter, you can kind of work out like, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount every quarter, every 3 months or whatever the case would be. Usually they'll say, hey, just 2 payments or 3 payments, but you can then start budgeting a little bit.
Yeah.
But we both were like, we're all in. We're going to do this hunt. It's going to be awesome. Tim and I have been friends for a few years, and I knew that I was going to enjoy the time with him in the mountains. So we put that on the calendar, and then fast forward to 2020, I drew my once in a lifetime mountain goat here in Utah for 2020, and it was an archery hunt, and Tim and I had agreed that we wanted to shoot mountain goats in Alaska with our bows. So while that was supposed to be my first mountain goat hunt, it ended up being my second.
All in 1 year.
Yeah. So I had 2 mountain goat hunts, both archery in 2020, and it was absolutely amazing.
Well, before we go into the stories, though, I want to step back for a second. And so like, I don't think I've talked about any mountain goat hunts up until this point. And one of the things, most of the stuff I've talked about has been elk and deer and some caribou up in Alaska and things. And, I'd always, when I first got into Western hunting, I thought that was like something that was out of reach, from a financial standpoint and just everything that goes along with those type of hunts. And then what I've come to learn is that with proper planning and everything else is how you can work those things in. It just takes time to be able to, prepare for it and understand that, okay, you have your goals set and you want to do a mountain goat hunt. You just got to make sure you're ready. Well, mostly financially. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. There were guys, no disrespect to any of the other hunters that I, ran into both in the airport in Alaska or in camp. Not in our camp, but in the other guys that were going hunting. And there were guys of all different walks and ages too. And it's certainly, sheep is a whole different ball game from a dollar standpoint. But a mountain goat, I think it's a doable kind of bucket list hunt if you really want to mix mountain hunting with an elusive, species that's super rewarding. So I too felt like it's totally out of my reach. And part of the reason why Tim and I decided we'd do it is because I didn't think I was going to draw my once in a lifetime goat hunt here in Utah for another 10 to 15 years. I was like, I'm going to be 60, but 60, 65 before I draw this thing. And so Tim and I were like, we should get this out of the way before we're any older.
Yeah. No, that's hilarious that you drew them both, and you drew the one the same time you were planning this other hunt. And I have learned that, like, from looking into it, that mountain goat hunts are a lot more affordable than a sheep hunt. I kind of put them in one bucket at one point until I actually looked into it and realized there's actually a pretty sizable gap in, going on a mountain goat hunt versus a sheep hunt from a dollar's perspective. And
yeah, you can get the range is quite a bit, but anywhere from that, probably in the 5,000-6,000 on the low end to 12 or 13 on the high end, depending on who you go with, if you draw a tag versus buying a tag. If you draw in Alaska, you have to hire a guide. That's just part of the deal. So it's, you kind of say, well, if you're, let's say you're 35, you're like, I want to do a goat hunt, and you set a date 10 years. Can you save, $10,000 in 10 years? Scratching, and yeah, you totally could. I mean, I think that's within reason for most people that have a good job. So
yeah,
even if you don't, man, you could, if you really want it bad enough, you could find a way for that. Now, a doll sheep hunt for 25 or 30 grand, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do some different things to be able to, whether you're having side businesses or whatever you're doing. A lot of when I started the podcast, and when because at first it wasn't really a plan from a financial standpoint, and once I realized that was a possibility, it was like, okay, I can make these hunts happen by doing some work on the side outside of my day job and being able to go to these different things. And there's so many different ways. I've heard of guys doing it, that got into real estate and some other different, side ventures to be able to fund these different things. And for others, it might just be cutting out some of the luxury items that, instead of buying a new truck every 3 years, being able to drive one a little bit longer and using that money and putting it into a different account. There's a bunch of different ways that you could, save up for that.
Yeah. And they're not, because you don't hunt them every year, and because most people never get to hunt them, or very few people hunt them once in their life, it's not talked about or highlighted a lot. It doesn't make for great, film. I remember talking to Tim and Ian, talking to Brian Call as well, and both of them have told me, their episodes their episodes that are deer or elk get far more views than the New Zealand tar and chamois and the mountain goat and the bear hunts and all that, because deer and elk is where it's at. But I think a mountain goat hunt is definitely within reach of anyone that wants to, and to have a cool adventure, especially in Alaska. God, man, Alaska is so legit. Like, if you haven't been to Alaska to hunt, I think you got to put it on your short radar.
Yeah, I know. After going there last year, when I went there for caribou last year, I'm like, I need to find a way to make it back to Alaska more often than not. It's amazing.
Amen. I just told my wife, said, hon, just plan on me going to Alaska about every third year. Because it is a magical place. It's rough. It's just super cool. The people, when you get in these small villages and towns, are just total salt of the earth, gritty, hard people. They live a life that's so much different than ours. From just the little stuff is often comes at a higher cost, not just financially, but it's cool. I could really get used to going there on the regular.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm already planning another caribou hunt back there in a few years, taking my dad and my brother and some others that want to show this experience that they can just to hunt in Alaska. And then I'm looking at what's next that I can do, maybe a little further out, and looking at, I want to hunt moose really bad, and like figuring out those types of hunts. And just, yeah, after going to Alaska, it spoiled me. One, there's the hunting pressures, we didn't see anybody the whole time we were there. And, after being out west where it can be sometimes crowded, it's just a whole different experience.
Yeah. Not seeing another human. Tim and I was our guide, and then there was an assistant guide, kind of the Sherpa, Wes. He was a total stud. But I mean, the four of us for, better part of a week plus, and that's it. Not even, I remember we saw a ship way out in out in the water. And that was as close to human contact as we got. And it was amazing.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that hunt. Like what kind of hunt was it? Were you flying into a place? Were you hiking into a place? What did it look like?
So we went with Lonesome Dove Outfitters out of Cordova, Alaska. And they're really cool, just super good people. And our guide was actually, I thought our outfitter was going to be our guide, but it wasn't. It was a guy named Adam that ended up guiding us. And it was, so we flew to Anchorage, met, Tim and I met there and in the airport. And then we flew to Cordova, which is just a short flight south. And then from Cordova, we actually flew north again in a float plane. We almost didn't get out, and then the weather was iffy, and then the float plane's like, no, we're not going. And it was like, yep, and then literally it was like, get your stuff, get down to the airfield in like 20 minutes or something. And we just rallied, got on the float plane, flew us in. And so we flew into a float destination right on the shore in this inlet. The guide and the two guides had been there. I think they went in the previous day or two, set up one of those big, like, base tents, not a wall tent, but just a big tent, had two of them there for us, and we landed. And then, so that was the access. And then it was hike up to the Alpine and then hunt from there. But we had that base camp. Pretty cool experience. I mean, we're flying in, seeing goats. I'm like, let's land right here.
Yeah.
And no, the pilot was super cool. And those bush pilots, I don't know about your experience, but they're hardy folk, and they're just good dudes, and they've seen it all, and I mean, that's their work.
They're not easily excitable, which is good.
No, super mellow.
Yeah.
They're just, all right, we're gonna buzz over here.
Yep.
And it was cool. It was a really cool experience.
Oh, that. Yeah, the whole bush plane idea of it, like when I was in Alaska, was one of my favorite parts of that entire experience, getting shoved into one of those little planes and just going in. Oh, you're flying so low over these places, and you land, like, I mean, you were in a float float plane, but we had the big Tundra tires on and just land on these like creek bottom rocky little sandbars. I'm like, are you serious? It's we're gonna land, and boom, right in there, and it's insane.
And they come in slow. Like I've done a couple bush plane flights in Alaska before, and man, it's true. You're landing there.
Yeah.
And I remember on another situation, the guy, he was like, I think the pilot can fly up here and pick up all of our gears, because there's a bad storm coming. And like, where's he going to land? He's like, oh, he'll figure it out. If the wind's coming this way, he'll land here. And if it's coming that way, he'll land there.
Yeah.
And they buzz up. All right, I got like through 2 minutes and I got to get out of here. Before the wind changes. Like, okay.
Yep.
Pretty nuts. That's part of the experience that's so unique, that I flat out loved. On the return after the hunt, when the planes came in, we had 2 planes came and picked us up because again they were expecting like 80 knot winds and just this gnarly storm of storms that was supposed to come in. And the 2 planes came in, and we flew out actually a different route. Instead of going over the mountains, we flew out into above the ocean and flew a different route back to Cordova. And just what a cool situation to be able to I just pinched myself.
Yeah.
I thought it's worth every penny.
Yeah, definitely. So once you got there, explain kind of a little bit about how long were you planning on being there, and what did that look like?
So that was because our guides had already gone in. It was just Tim and I flying in, so I didn't have really any. The outfitter took us over to the little airstrip where we jumped in the float plane, and so we didn't really have any idea of what was going to go down. I thought, well, we'll probably land and then just chill out here for a while, and then saunter up the mountain the next day. But we landed and, took all our stuff off and said, all right, you guys are in that tent over there. So Tim and I piled all our gear in there. And I knew that we were going to be at base camp. So I brought a few extra items. I was kind of, one of those, well, I could take this or this. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use. So I'm like, I'll take both. And there were weight limitations, but they, so I had more gear than I ended up needing. But we got there and I was expecting just, all right, we're going to hang tight and we'll get some food. And literally we got there, got settled in. And then one guy comes over and he goes, hey, we're taking off in about an hour. So just get packed up and we're going to hike up to the Alpine. And it was like, Tim and I looked at each other. All right, man, it's go time. Let's get going. I got an hour to get everything ready. And so we, the other cool thing that I hadn't anticipated is we were going to climb about 3,000 feet up to where these the goats were hanging, and they had kind of they gave us a little bit of insight to where we're going to be. But what I had pictured in my mind definitely didn't turn out to be what it was, because go hiking up through the forest. Couple of things that are worth mentioning. And number one is as we brought crampons along, and the crampons were not for traveling through snow, but for simply going up the vegetated slopes, because the slopes were so dang steep and there was literally no way to get up and down them safely without crampons on. So that was super unique. Something I never thought I would do.
Yeah.
And it was burly. I mean, it was, kind of roly-poly for a little bit and then it just shot straight up. The second thing that was really cool was the guy, I ate so many dang blueberries. I probably consumed, I don't know, $100 worth of blueberries from a grocery store if I was buying them. But the guide, instead of picking individual blueberries off the big blueberry bushes, he would break a limb and then just eat them, just without even picking them off, just eat them, with his mouth. And so Tim and I looked at each other, and I remember just like, all right, guess we're going to do what the guides do. So it was literally a buffet as we're climbing up this mountainside. And that was really cool. Yeah, it took us a little while. We got up. It was just spectacular coming out of those forests. The Devil's Club wasn't really that bad. I know people always talk about how gnarly it is. In that particular area, we didn't have to deal with that. So thankfully my gear didn't get ripped to shreds like I've heard horror stories about. but we got up above the timberline, and I thought, oh, we're gonna camp right here, and then like higher, like we're going way high, and we went up, and we ended up. I mean, I'm looking at all these spots, thinking, oh, this is a great place to camp. We should camp right here, this basin, that basin. And they took us clear to the dang top of this mountain, and we were just under kind of maybe couple hundred feet under the summit on this little teeny perch, and it was stormy, and I'm like, and they already had one tent set up, and I'm like, there's no way we're gonna fit a tent in there. So Tim convinced me to set up our tent on this gravel bar, and you literally, with how much moisture there was, you could dig down about 3 inches, and that was the water table in this little gravel. So you didn't want to like kneel too heavy, like in the ground, because like the water would seep up. But so we ended up on this kind of little perch on the side of this peak, overlooking this giant valley, some glaciers across the other side, hanging glaciers, and then we could see we had bumped into a billy on the way up. And then we had this little bit of a peak above us, and then these 2 valleys behind, well, a zillion valleys and zillion peaks. But what we could see was just, I was already just awestruck at how beautiful and how rugged it was.
Yeah. So how do you navigate that type of terrain when it's that, at least what I have in my mind, like I'm picturing just like strictly like rock type country. Is that what it was like?
When we got up there, it was above timberline. It was probably about 50% rock and 50% like just kind of that tundra vegetation.
Yep.
And sometimes it was, you're going up just steep. Like, we would out of our high camp, we would put crampons on right out of camp, because we had to go up a couple of steep grassy slopes and traverse this pretty steep hill before we got around to this shale and all the rock. And it was literally like, you slip and fall, you may not arrest yourself for 1,000 feet. And not that we were like at risk of dying or anything, but there were some spots that you wouldn't be able to stop yourself, just because it was like that slick grass or tundra. Mm-hmm. And the blueberries up there were all ground blueberries rather than a plant that was growing, like waist or chest high.
Yeah.
So we would still, like, I was snacking blueberries left and right. Oh man, that just became like my deal. Every time we'd sit down and be like, oh, there's some blueberries.
Yeah.
And they were telling us that the blueberry harvest was extraordinarily good that year. But so we were about 50% rock and 50% on vegetation. But there were times where we were in the middle of what I would call a moonscape. It was just zero vegetation. Like where Tim shot his goat, it was straight up moonscape.
Was it tough to find goats once you were up in that country?
Not so much. We did a lot of hiking. The first day we simply just hiked around, and what was interesting is, like, you and I go, like, if we go hunting, like when I'm hunting, it's game time, and I'm like, all right, there's an animal, let's go kill it. And these guys, the guides, were so super patient. They were just like, no, we got time. So on the first day, our second day, we spent the entire day basically just kind of sussing out what goats were where, because the goats are white and most of the hillside didn't have snow on it. They were pretty easy to pick out. But there were also goats tucked into real nooks and crannies that we definitely had to go search out. Tons of glassing those first 2 days. But they weren't terribly hard to pick out, but they certainly were not an easy to get to locations, most of them that we found.
Yeah, with a bow too. Like,
yeah, and I remember the guide afterwards, he goes, man, I didn't know you. He goes, I thought that Dennis was crazy for booking a 2-on-1 that were both archery. And I remember him saying, I got this gun here, because he would carry a gun both for protection as well as just insurance in case like one of us made a real poor shot. Let's say, had we made a poor shot and the animal was wounded, and got out to a couple hundred yards, we could take care of it and still harvest the goat. But I I feel pretty confident in my abilities in the mountains and as a bow hunter. But there were times where I thought, man, I don't know this is going to happen. Like both of us with our bows, it's the country you deal with. And then these goats, mountain goats are both skittish and curious. They're much like, like antelope in that way, that they're real skittish, but they also get real curious. And that's, I saw both behaviors, where mountain goat, when the mountain goats would see us, they would absolutely just like bolt for the next county. Whereas others would kind of look at us and walk toward us a little bit and like, what the heck is going on with that? What is that? Yeah. So a really interesting combination of both personalities.
Huh. Yeah, that is interesting. And when you would, were there goats like that you just absolutely couldn't get to, or did you have to like kind of plan that out as far as like which ones were accessible? I'm just trying to picture that in my head, how that would work.
100%. There were these two really nice billies and a handful of nannies that were and a couple kids that were over across the valley from us. So we would have had, if you imagine where the peak we're on, would have had to go like a horseshoe to the other side of the horseshoe. And if you were to go down and up, it would be like 3,000 feet down through the most gnarly gnar.
Yeah.
And then up. And I remember looking at that up thinking there's no way I could even get over there, because there were cliffs, impassable cliffs. And I remember seeing a couple of chutes thinking, maybe we could scamper up that. But I remember as we went about halfway around that horseshoe, maybe 2/3 of the way around the horseshoe, to a little sub peak, kind of a little nipple looking peak that was over in that, to look into the next two valleys. And we were over there scouting. And I remember telling the guide, like, hey man, those goats are still over there, like on that snowfield and around the corner from that little glacier. And he essentially he just said, no, we're not even there. We can't get over there. I'm like, no, I think we can, here's the client, like, like, no, I know better. And that's, I'm like, no, man, I think, cause I'm in my mind, I'm scheming, if that goat's huntable, or if that goat's one I want to take, I'm going to find a way to get over there and kill that thing. But that it was absolutely impassable. There just really wasn't a way, unless you wanted to spend a couple of days circumnavigating the peak and coming in from the other side. So there were goats that I saw. I remember, glassing over to this other basin, and I'm like, hey, there's some goats over there. And he goes, stop looking over there, because we can't get there. Yeah. I'm like, okay, but it's curious to know there's some goats over there. Yeah. In case you're wondering. So certainly some that you just had to write off. But as the time went on, I think Adam recognized that Tim and I, came willing and able to work hard and to go as far as it takes. And I remember two particular goats that on the day that I was able to harvest, when I killed my goat, they were clear down this ridge, like way down, dropping maybe 1,500 vertical feet and probably a 2.5 mile length, because it was out this far ridge. And I remember I said, man, if we can't find any more goats, like those things look legit. And he goes, we're just going to kind of put that one in the back pocket. And he just was like, I don't know, man, that is a long ways out there. Because we were day hunting from the high camp. We weren't hunting with our packs on, with our full pack and all that gear on our back.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm sure navigating that kind of country at night just isn't a good idea.
It's rough. So interestingly, is the guide actually had a deadline. He basically said, I won't let a bow hunter shoot after, I want to say either 3:30 or 4:30. And because he said, I don't want to work. I don't want to fiddle around with the recovery like into the night. And he said, B, I don't like hiking back in the dark. And I don't know about you, like where you hunt, for whitetail, I'm sure you've walked out in the dark plenty.
Every time.
Yeah. Right. Like I hunt, my poor friend, Justin, he's gotten, multiple calls at 10, 11 at night when I get back to cell service. Hey man, I got an elk down. Want to come help me pack it out? Because I will hunt here in Utah. I'll hunt till after dark, and then I'll walk out. I know I'm confident in the country, and I know confident in my skills, getting around in the mountains and even in the dark. So I had kind of had that mindset, like, Adam, you guided up here. Like, we all have compass, we all have GPSs. Why don't we just stay out here and hunt, and then we'll hike back in the dark? And he was pretty, like, that was kind of one of the codes that he lived by. And so it was not, when one night we did actually come back in the dark, and he didn't have, I don't think he had his GPS with him, or something had gone wrong. And I happened to have and it was clouded in, no stars. And I had done I had tracked myself on my Garmin, Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying, oh yeah, I ran a tracker like for the first half of today. And I said, we can just follow it. And then we were going up through this face that had like a pile of cliffs. And if you got too far, like to the hiker's right, it would have been like you fall, you die kind of world. And we had to go left. And then when we got to the summit ridge, go down to the right into the saddle, and on the backside is where our camp was. And I remember I looked at the tracker and I said, dude, we're off. I think we need to be over there. And he goes, no. I said, man, I don't mean to try and tell you I told you so, but I think we need to be over there. And so after the hunt, he goes, hey, how do I get one of those watches that you had? Because it saved our bacon. And even a guide that was super experienced, and that guy was a total animal. He was an awesome guide. Even he, we had a bit of an adventure there in the dark coming back one night.
Oh, I can imagine that would be sketchy, to say the least. So what? Yeah. So once you found the goat that you were going in after, kind of walk me through that process of trying to close the deal on these animals.
No, so Tim had killed his goat, I think on day 3 or 4, and we had a couple days left. And we looked across this big valley, to this far ridge, and we'd seen a couple goats over there. And so we kind of went down off the main horseshoe ridge that we were on, that we had camped near, and we went down and up to this, he called it this bear ridge. It was kind of this intermediate ridge between these two long like ridges that were, I don't know, a couple 3 miles apart. And we glassed up 2 nice billies, and then in that same basin, we thought there were 3 other billies. And then we figured as we got closer later in the day, it was 2 young billies and an old nanny. And the 2 billies that we had glassed went up and over the backside. And I remember the guide saying, I've never taken clients over there. So I dubbed that area, I called it Narnia. He's like, we don't go to Narnia. And I said, well, I want to kill one of those goats, and that's the best prospects we have. Like, let's go. So we saddled up, and Tim and I and Adam took off. Wes he'd gone down to our base camp because we'd run out of some food. We were almost out of food. So he had gone down. So he wasn't hunting with us that day. So we went over, and imagine basically we're transferring from one horseshoe down through a valley, over a small ridge, and then up to another like horseshoe. And we start on one side of it, and we have to wrap around over a peak and then basically follow a long, real rugged ridge. And, I kind of think about some of my previous experiences in the mountains, climbing and backpacking and skiing. And I looked at some of this terrain, and I thought, I just was excited. But I remember looking back at some of the pictures thinking, and that was pretty rugged. That was out there a bit. And so anyway, we got out to the end of this ridge, end of the horseshoe, and we look over the other side, and those 2 billies are nowhere to be found. We saw a nanny with a kid, got pinned down by a small billy, as we were kind of peeking over the other side. So we kept working our way out. And at the very end of the horseshoe, there was a little saddle, and it went up to this perch, this little point. And maybe when we got up on the top of that, we climbed up the top of that, and I kid you not, this thing is probably about as big around as a good sized dining room table. And it just just straight down on all 3 sides. And up on the very top of that, there's some bear scat. Like a bear had climbed up on the top of this thing, munched on some berries and just like perched himself out. I'm like, Tim, you got to come up here. Like, look at this. And we were just blown away. So we're glassing all three sides, looking for these billies. Couldn't find them. Kind of getting a little discouraged. We found a couple of nannies, and then we could see like all the way out Narnia. There were some other billies way out there, and it was far too far for us to go on a day hunt. So we backtracked and we got up on this little face, like, the grass is like, maybe 3 inches high. So there's no cover. And we're looking over the side and we glass back and we see a billy down in this next valley with all we can see is his head sticking out. And he looks pretty good size. And he looks like, maybe it's a smaller of the two. And he absolutely pegs us. And we're all laying there. And then he would kind of look away and we'd just inch our way down. So I inched my way down first. And then he would look back and I'm like, what the crap? And he was probably about 300 yards away, 350. And so the three of us, it took us 45 minutes to cover basically about 50 yards to get back out of sight. We pitched around that little end of the horseshoe. And we were getting ready to go on this stalk. Our guide, Adam, he was wearing these Koflak, like hard plastic mountaineering boots. And I said, Adam, there's no way we're making it down this slope in any sort of like, cause it's all shale and kind of loose. So there's no way we're going to make it down if you're in those boots. And he's like, yeah, I know. I'm like, I'm sorry, bro, but you got to take those things off. And so he ditched his shells and he was just running his liners. And we stalked down this slope dry. And I convinced them, I said, let's just leave our packs up here because they're going to be heavy. I don't think we're going to be like kind of, when you have a heavy pack, you're overcorrecting. Yep. It's hard to get footing. Especially in shale, you're going to be louder and go deeper into the loose rock. So we go down, we make our way down, we lift our packs up on the top. I said, if nothing comes of this, we've got to go back up anyways to leave this valley. So we make it down there, kind of sneaking over to where we last had seen him. And we kind of poke around this corner and the guide's like, he's going to be right here. And like, poof, nothing there. I'm like, dang it. And I'm thinking, and I'm like, no, he's going to be around this next corner. So Tim's in my back pocket, Adam's to my left. I've got an arrow knocked and we're just sneaking around and we pop around this corner and I see him. And all of a sudden, he's basically about 20 yards from us. He spins and goes around the backside of his knob. And without even the guide, because when you're in a guided situation, if you've never been guided, when you're in a guided situation, no matter how skilled of a hunter you are or how much experience you are, you have to also realize like the guide hunter relationship and respect it. Otherwise, you won't ever work together as a team. So I've only been guided a couple of times. And this was one of them. And so I knew I should just, whatever instruction the guide gives me, I'm going to follow, and I'm going to kind of wait for him to make some of the key critical decisions. But in this particular situation, when the guide was like, oh, there he goes, I didn't even think twice. I think that just the killer instinct set in. I spun and I just pointed to Tim and Tim's like, hey, I want to film your hunt. So I'm like, oh, cool. But at that point, I'm like, I'm not waiting for Tim. And I came around that corner and he was right there. I just instantly drew and he spun and spun a 180. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have time to range, but I guessed he was about 35 yards. And I just drew back and let it rip. And we ranged it later and he was like 31 yards. And I shot what I didn't know at the time. When I shot him, the guide had seen the other two billies we were looking for. I thought that was one of the billies. And it was actually a third billy that we had not ever seen. The two big ones that we were looking for actually ran off. Well, the guide tells me that after the billy runs kind of hobbles off and he's like butt to me. And Tim's like, get another arrow. So I just draw back, I range. It's like he's like 50 and moving, and I just let one rip, and I just see this poof of hair, and I'm like, sweet, I hit him. And what happened is I actually like it went basically through the hair up his spine and through the hair in his neck. I didn't even hit his body. and I just saw this puff of hair. I was later got bummed out because I kind of shaved his mane a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then he just went over. So he went over this rise and down into that next big, huge valley. And I'm like, oh, dude, do not roll down into this valley. Cause it's, I don't know, 800 feet to the first, ledge, and then down another into some timber. So we bust around, we get up on this rise, and I'm looking, I can't see. And the guide's kind of holding me like, don't fall over. And we, Tim got a different angle, and he's like, I can see him down here. And he had fallen over and died. And I was pretty amazing. When we got down there, I'm like, man, this is a good sized billy. And the guide goes, I think those two other billies ran off. And I'm like, what? This isn't one of those billies. Why'd you let me shoot him? Yeah. And he goes, this is a good billy. And I had that moment where I was like, oh, it's not the one I wanted. And I remember looking at Tim and saying, dude, if I ever see him ungrateful, like, just kick me in the nuts. Cause I'm like, because for a moment I was all bummed out because the two we were looking for had actually ran off. And this one I think was a little smaller, but then I kind of came back to my senses and realized I'm in the most amazing rugged country ever. And I just shot a mountain goat with my bow, and this is a once in a lifetime situation. And I was just elated. It was super rad.
Oh, that is awesome. And did he fall a long ways? Like, did you have to go down and get him?
Super fortunate. He rolled and he hit this spine on this whole like face. There was one little spine where there was a little rock outcropping, and there's probably 2.5, 3 feet wide of kind of this vertical little spine. And he hit that spine and hit the one rock. And had he fallen to the left or the right, he would have got another 500 feet. And it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And there was some water near, like just around the corner. There's a little stream kind of running. So we were able to walk over to this little stream bed that had a little bit of a bench. So we transported the meat over there after we took photos and washed up. And those guys they kept saying so the first thing we did was left the weapon there, and we had to hike back up the 600 feet or so to the ridge to get our packs, and then come back down. Yeah. Those guys gave me a bunch of gas for that. They were like, see, I told you we should have brought the packs. And I was like, I know, but I don't think we would have been down there quiet enough.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And then obviously you packed them back to base camp. And then from there, did you guys go all the way down to the main base camp after that?
Yeah. So that was a long night. That was the night we came back in the dark. Our hope was to get around the first horseshoe into the next valley to then go up that cliffy face and then back over to our camp. We wanted to at least get through the horseshoe valley because it was a little tricky, which we were successful. It got dark right as we got over what was called the bear hump, got back into Moonscape. And that was when we navigated, I remember looking at Adam, that guy was an animal. I mean, he packed so much. I mean, my pack was heavy. Tim's was super heavy. He had all his camera gear. We had this goat between the three of us, and then all the gear that we had. So we got back, we were pretty bushed. We knew the next day we would make our way down. We had 2 goats, and then I had also killed a black bear, my first bear, with a bow. And so we had, between the 4 of us, we had 3 animals to pack down. And, usually the guides on a situation like that, a guide will let you sleep in, and then you just kind of take your time. But the guide got us up early and said, hey, we've got to get down. There's a storm coming, and the last window of time is like 5 p.m. or 4 p.m., whatever it was. And he said, we've got to go now. And so it was just full on, we loaded up. We did a meat haul down, and I remember Tim was weird. He got kind of sick, and I don't know what it was from, but that guy was turning kind of white, and he lost a little bit of lunch, and I don't know. I think it might have been dehydration of sorts, but even he was pretty shocked at how gassed he was. But we went down, back up, broke camp, and took camp on the rest of the meet. So we made 2 runs that day, so 30,000 feet each way. And we missed the airdrop. We missed the airplane picking us up by about a half hour. So it was a, hey, just plan on hunkering down, and we're going to be here for probably 3 or 4 days and we'll weather out this storm.
Oh, really?
It fortunately ended up only being a day and a half or a day, but because they had a little kind of the eye before the eye of the storm kind of situation where it got calm. But Tim and I we looked at each other and said, well, at least we're just going to hang out in this tent and play cards and just chit chat for 2 or 3 days and wait for the storm to go its way. And that's part of Alaska too, as you probably know, is just being uber flexible to whatever Mother Nature dishes up.
Yeah, I mean, I made sure on the end of my trip that I had extra days that I was able to be off of work because I just didn't know. We ended up coming out early because we tagged out and they were able to come in and get us. But heard from another group that was not that far from us, but apparently where they were at, the storms were worse, and they killed on like the second or third day, and they were stuck there another 4 or 5 days before they could even get out.
Wow, it was just waiting.
Yep, just waiting. That'd be a lot of time in the tent, that's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, but that's freaking awesome. I've been looking forward to talking to you about that story specifically, just because it's, again, I love Alaska, and I think as many people as they can experience it should, because it's if you ever thought about it.
Oh yeah, and then I still vivid memories of looking around that valley. Here I am with my goat, and I'm just looking around this valley like this is the most unreal place on the planet for me to be at this moment, and to have been fortunate enough to kill a goat with my bow, my second one that year. It'll never repeat itself ever.
Yeah, I could imagine, and. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper than we have time for, but into your love. We're just talking about this epic mountain hunt, but you love whitetails as well. So I just want to hear kind of your thought process behind whitetail hunting.
Man, I never thought that I would be a whitetail junkie, and I wouldn't say that I'm a whitetail like guru or anything like that. I'm still like a Padawan learner, but the whitetail hunting is so amazing. It's just like addicting as ever. And I've on a lease with some friends, some guys that were actually CamoFire customers for a long, long time. We became good friends. They're from Tennessee. They have a lease in Kentucky, and a spot opened up a few years back, and they said, "Hey, we know you love whitetail hunting, or you want to get into it." And man, those guys have been so awesome, taking me under their wing, teaching me stuff. They do a lot of the work on this big farm. And I go out twice a year. In November, I go for a week. And then in January, I usually go for 3 or 4 days. But my goodness, whitetail are such a fascinating deer. They're so dang like wily and fidgety and just they're like ghosts. They appear out of nowhere, trying to pattern those things. Everything about it I love. I love the suspense. I still, even a doe will come up and I still get like buck fever and like my heart starts beating. I start calm down already. It's just a cool, very different type of hunting that I don't care how many guys from the West like poo sitting in a tree stand, but sitting in a tree stand hunting whitetail in the right spot, the right time of year, or even in a bad spot, the bad time of year, in my book is still just fascinating and so fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a whole different, I look forward to after, the tough Western hunts and stuff to spending some time sitting in a tree. That's it's like like the rut, it's long. For me and really for anybody that does it, like it's a grind. Even though you're just sitting there, it's a grind, but it's also a nice, physical break a little bit there too.
Yeah, whitetail for me has been like every single sit, every single like movement of deer. I learned stuff, and maybe because I've only been doing this for 5-6 years. But I feel like I'm always learning. I'm always being surprised at what the deer are doing or how they're moving. Or I just, watching a buck, nose down, chasing does, and does just bounding, all over the woods. I mean, all that stuff is so wild. I remember one day we were out, it was middle of the day, and my friend Richard was at the farm. And I remember we were checking one of his stands because he wanted to swap out a strap. And I saw a doe over near this fence line in the CRP next door. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to ground stalk her. And he goes, you can't ground stalk that. Like whitetail don't ground stalk. I'm like, I'm going for it. And I mean, that was a fun challenge. Yeah. I got to like 40 yards and had she been on the right side of the fence, I would have put an arrow in her. Cause in Kentucky you get a handful of doe tags. Yeah. And that, so I've gotten into, I recently just got into some saddle hunting too. And I did a ton of saddle hunting last year and I just, all these different ways of hunting whitetail and it's just, I'm like a student, I'm soaking it in.
Yeah. Oh, it is cool. Cause like for a while I had typically only hunted archery for whitetails because I'd filled my tags and been lucky and got done before rifle season came in. Well, the last few years I've struggled to that point and had to get the gun, but I found a whole nother love of being able to, I got away from going in the tree during that time and just sneaking, just still hunting, kind of sneaking around these ridges and doing,
that's next level.
Setting up for a little bit and then just kind of moving along. And that has a whole nother element of fun to it. And that's why I do love whitetails. There's so many different ways and styles that you can hunt them and different times of the year. And it's a blast.
And I mean, with elk are smart. All the animals in the woods have, a sense of smart. You can get away with a lot with any kind of animal, but I'm shocked at how whitetail. I'm like, no way that guy just busted me.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? I didn't even breathe.
Yeah.
And, it's like, and the wind is in my face. And I'm just, it's amazing. Whitetail are a pretty rad creature. And I think maybe because they're so plentiful, people just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Like they're dime a dozen, but there's a lesson you learn from every whitetail running I've had.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life, and every single time I still learn something. I love it. I'm fascinated by just watching them and understanding why they're doing certain things and the things they eat, and it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I love it. I'm looking forward to November. I actually passed on an odd end hunt invite because it was going to be the same time as my annual trip pilgrimage to Kentucky.
I know you were telling me that before we started recording, and that had to be tough, but you can't.
I was like, oh man, I don't know about that. I can't go to Texas to hunt odd end. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh man, well. Good luck to you on your hunts this year, Kendall. I appreciate you taking the time during your busy time with Black Ovis and Camo Fire and everything else, because you were shipping orders earlier. You said you were in the warehouse and everything, and like I appreciate you taking some time.
No worries. I love talking about fun hunts and talking with cool people like yourself, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's been good getting to know you, and hopefully this has been helpful or interesting to your audience.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was for me. So if no one else gets anything out of it, then I don't know what they're listening to. But so where can people find, whether you want to give links, Black Ovis, everything else, your own stuff, whatever. I'd love to be able to direct people to check out some of your stuff.
Yeah, for sure. CamoFire.com and blackovis.com are 2 retail sites, and then crispius.com is another website. I'm on the gram. I don't post a ton, but Kendall J Card, 2 L's on the Kendall, yeah, that's kind of where you can find me. And if anyone anyone out there wants to hit me up for, gear recommendations or tips or whatever, I'm happy to share. Just Kendall at CamoFire.com is my email.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Kendall, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.